I recreated this scene from Raiders of the Lost Ark as a miniature inside this disposable cooler. And then I decided to make things even harder on myself by placing myself in the scene. What started as some cheap styrofoam became a doorway back to the adventure that has inspired me my entire life. Like a lot of kids growing up in the 80s and 90s, I believed in adventure because of movies like Raiders of the Lost Ark. There was something about that map room, sunlight hitting the staff, the hidden chamber revealed, that made the world feel full of secrets waiting to be uncovered, and heroes who would risk everything to find them. Recently, I went for a walk with my wife and our little boy, Indiana. Yes, we named him after the man in the hat. We were just exploring like we often do, letting him splash in the creek and throw rocks. At one point, we randomly stopped and filled a bag with sand, partly because it felt like something Indiana Jones would do, but partly because I had an idea. What if I could recreate that map room scene? But instead of using digital tools, I'd build it entirely by hand and use this dirt my son and I collected to help bring it to life. These days, you could recreate this environment in seconds by simply typing the right prompt into an AI image generator. But there's a reason that doesn't feel the same. The instant gratification wears off the moment you get it. When you make something by hand, specifically something you love, it forces you to pay attention, to slow down, to care about every detail. And for some reason, I started thinking about this documentary I saw once.
We met a pair of young movie makers who are filming their own version of Raiders of the Lost Ark. Their summer project is the subject of tonight's Page 13.
In the 1980s, a group of kids remade the entire film shot for shot because they loved it that much. They spent years, one shot at a time. They couldn't just pull it up and stream it on Disney+. In fact, they didn't even have it on VHS. There was literally no way to watch it except in the theater. They had to do it from memory. That's the spirit I wanted to tap into. Real effort, real love. A project hopefully worthy of the art that shaped me. Well, if it was an adventure I was looking for, I found it. Nothing about this was easy. For starters, I had to cut each individual stone on the wall from foam board and then shave the edges to make it look more realistic. The walls and ceiling are curved, which meant I needed math to figure out the proper angles. Of course, there was no way on earth I was going to do that. Instead, I did what I always do and eyeballed it. Now, nothing is perfect here, but hopefully it captures the vibes and the feeling at least. Also, I just realized because of the wide-angle lens, I look just like Megamind right here.
Hello.
Once I had a good bit of the wall and ceiling done, I pulled out my camera and tested the angle of the main wide shot to see how it would look. And that's when it hit me. This styrofoam cooler is the wrong dimensions. It's not even long enough, so I thought I'm gonna have to start over, and I've barely just begun. This definitely took the wind out of my sails, but after staring at it for a really long time, I realized there was such an easy solution. Cut the end of the sucker off and extend the wall using some of the styrofoam I had already cut from the other sides of the cooler. And with enough duct tape, I can pretty much do anything. I started painting the hieroglyphics freehand. The first pass looked way too thick and cartoony, so I painted kind of a wash over them, making the lines faded and chipped away at it a little, like the stone had been worn away by time. After that, I switched to a pen and a fine point paintbrush, because if I want this miniature to feel like a giant chamber, the hieroglyphs have to be drawn tiny, so on camera they read as towering, full-scale carvings. I painted over the hieroglyphs and started over several times before I got it right. But the more I did it, the more I got into a rhythm, losing track of time, just enjoying the process. It reminded me of afternoons with Indiana, drawing chalk murals on the retaining wall by our house. We make up whatever comes to mind. Monsters, pyramids, aliens, random shapes. There's no judgment or any expectations, which as an adult is a rare experience. That same playful freedom started to seep into this project. A little bit of Egypt, a little bit of Star Wars, and a whole lot of imagination. Spielberg and Lucas were masters at that, capturing childlike wonder and blending it into their stories in subtle, clever ways. One of my favorite examples, the hidden Easter eggs. The Indiana Jones sets were filled with them. Like this R2-D2 and C-3PO hieroglyph was actually carved into the temple walls, so of course I had to add it to my own. Finally, I had to make the miniature city, which is strange considering I'm already making a miniature, so this was like a mini within a mini. My first attempt was rough. I tried to make the little buildings out of empty Propel boxes, just because that's what I had laying around. But they were too flimsy to hold their shape, so I ended up just reusing them as paint palettes. In the end, I switched to foam board for the miniature city and pieced it together with hot glue. I used some modeling clay to make the tiny statues as well as the dome-shaped roofs in the mini city. But every time I thought I was making progress, I'd realize something was wrong. The scale felt off, the texture was too clean. After hours of dry brushing every surface to make it look old and weathered, I thought, I'm finally ready to shoot. But halfway through setting up the shot, it became obvious something was missing. The set looked too empty. So I scrambled to make a few extra buildings and rooftops, carved out of foam board, and then I quickly painted them, literally minutes before I hit record. But despite all this work, there's one thing that could still ruin the shots, no matter how realistic I tried to paint the set. Lighting. In filmmaking, lighting is everything. It's arguably the main thing that gives a Spielberg shot that Spielberg magic. Sure, it's also the moving camera, the dramatic push-ins, the amazing blocking where the actors move in and out, reframing the shot throughout, and of course, the occasional oneer. But what they all have in common is his very specific lighting style. Spielberg never worries too much about realism with his lighting. It's more about creating a feeling, a mood, a larger-than-life composition. This signature look often starts with a harsh backlight, an intense light placed behind characters that creates a glowing halo separating them from the background. When combined with fog, his other favorite tool, this light scatters softly through the mist, adding depth and atmosphere to the scene. This technique does more than just look beautiful, it shapes the mood, making the world feel larger and more mysterious. Silhouettes become sharper, details soften, and even ordinary moments gain a sense of wonder and emotional weight. It's a powerful way to draw the audience deeper into the story. So I started with my main backlight, which was also supposed to mimic the sun. I used a 120D, which is a very bright light, especially on such a small scale. I used some haze in a can to fill the air with dust and then faked the sun moving across the floor by slowly lifting and lowering the light. I used a diffuser with an LED panel behind it to make it look like the sky was burning white outside the chamber. And then I matched the angles as best I could. The miniature wasn't perfect, but in the right light, with the right angle, it felt like the real thing. I only had 2 walls actually finished, which meant this could only be filmed from one angle. But watching the scene over and over, I realized how much I needed to show over my shoulder to tell the full story. So to create the other side of the room, I flipped the model around and grabbed some black packaging foam I just happened to have. My goal was to hide that wall in the shadows, so I quickly threw some paint on it and drew a few very basic lines to at least give a little texture to feel like stones in the blurry background. And as long as I hid that area in the shadows, it looked like it was going to work perfectly. And the finishing touch, the dirt Indy and I had collected, mixed with just a little cinnamon, made a perfect texture to cover the ground, and I would pile it up in certain areas to hide the seams as needed. Now, in case you forgot, I did say I was going to put myself into this scene, which means I need a costume. I don't have anything like the Middle Eastern attire Indy is wearing here, plus I kind of feel like I'd maybe get canceled if I wore that. So I'm going to opt for the classic Indiana Jones costume. A look so iconic, even just the silhouette is instantly recognizable. So I raided my closet, no pun intended. Thankfully, I had a few things that weren't exactly perfect, but when you put them all together, it definitely has an Indiana Jones vibe. I quickly made my staff of raw using my wife's antique jewelry dish. It's brass and reflective, so it should do the trick. I taped it to a long piece of wood I had in the garage, and just like that, my makeshift staff of raw was born. In the end, I got to step into the adventure I dreamed of as a kid. Just me, a styrofoam cooler, and the sand my son and I collected on our own adventure. None of it was planned perfectly. I had to figure it out as I went. And somehow, those mistakes made it feel even more authentic. Because it wasn't just about recreating a scene, it was about rediscovering the magic that made me fall in love with storytelling in the first place. When I look back, I don't see just a miniature set. I see every moment that led here, every movie that made me believe the world was bigger and more mysterious than it looked, and every small act of creativity that proves adventure isn't something you find, it's something you create. So sit back and enjoy my version of the map room scene from Raiders of the Lost Ark.